What is going on, everybody? Today we've got a pretty fun video here as we will be going through my 2023 NBA mock draft. I am recording this the night of the draft. It's a little bit before 5 o'clock Eastern, so the draft will be in around 3 hours. By the time I'm recording this and by the time this video uploads, there may be some new news. We may get new trades, new odds with certain picks. The draft order might be altered, so just be aware of that. We have seen a number of moves over the last couple of days, most notably the three-teamer with Kristaps Porzingis going to the Celtics, and then today the Chris Paul-Jordan Poole swap with the Wizards and Warriors. So I'm uploading this video both on my regular main channel, Octagonal Gaming, along with my second channel, Octi's Draft Talks. For those of you watching on the main channel that may have not known, I do have a second channel where I talk about real-life sports, the NFL and NBA draft. I have a podcast over there with a good friend of mine, so I recommend you check it out if that's something that you might be interested in, if you want to hear me talk more about real-life sports. Today's mock draft will be 2 rounds. We are going through the entire draft. There will not be any trades because trades are way too hard to predict in the NBA draft. I have a gut feeling we may see a big move or two, possibly Portland at 3, maybe goes out and gets a star, especially if Scoot Henderson is on the board for them. And this draft is also a predictive mock draft, so not necessarily what I would do with all of these teams, more so what I am predicting will end up happening. So without further ado, let's get this show on the road. So with the first pick, I had the Spurs going with a little bit of a surprise. I had them selecting Scoot Henderson, the point guard from the G League Ignite. Yeah, no, I'm just kidding. They're going to select Victor Wembanyama. No major surprise here. Wemby ends up being the number 1 pick. He has been drooled over by scouts literally for years, since he was probably around 14 years old. And it's finally time for him to be drafted into the NBA. I think Wembanyama is as good of a prospect as people say he is. I think the one thing I will point out is that it's pretty unfair to expect him to be better than like Kevin Durant and Hakeem Olajuwon. Even if he's the best prospect we have ever seen, I don't necessarily think it's fair to give him those expectations because those guys are some of the greatest players the league has ever seen. But regardless, pretty easy pick. I think San Antonio is a great spot for him. I think they have a really solid young core to where Vic can step in and be the guy immediately. But they have a lot of players who can be solid role players like Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sohan, and others. Obviously getting coached by Greg Popovich as well as a major bonus too. So I think the Spurs getting the number 1 overall pick really worked out for Wembanyama. This is definitely one of the best landing spots he could have gone to. With the second pick, there's been a lot of chatter about this selection. Is it Scoot Henderson? Is it Brandon Miller? Over the last couple of days, it seemed like Brandon Miller was trending to be the selection, but this morning we had another pivot. Now Scoot Henderson is the betting favorite. So it has really gone back and forth, but for me, I really have not gone back and forth at all. I think there's one choice here, and that choice is Scoot Henderson, the point guard from the G League Ignite. I think he absolutely can complement LaMelo Ball. Yes, both of them are pretty ball-dominant players, but I do think both of them will be able to complement each other enough. It doesn't hurt to have more ball handlers and more playmakers on your roster. But the real reason why I think Scoot should be the pick here is I think he is the best prospect available, and I don't think it is all that close. You can argue Brandon Miller might be a better true fit on the team, but we've seen a lot of teams try to draft for fit over value in the top 3 over the last 5 years, and it has not worked out. 2018, the Kings had the 2nd overall pick. They selected Marvin Bagley. He was a better pure fit for the roster rather than drafting another ball-dominant guard to pair with De'Aaron Fox. That ball-dominant guard ended up being the very next pick, and his name is Luka Doncic. I think it's fair to say the Kings regret that. 2 years later, in 2020, the Golden State Warriors had the number 2 pick, still trying to find pieces for their championship window. They drafted James Wiseman, who is no longer on the roster and has really turned into probably a bust at this point. They could have had LaMelo Ball. Had James Wiseman developed, he probably would have been a better fit than LaMelo, but a lot of people, myself included, believed that LaMelo was the better prospect at the time, and I think Golden State regrets not picking him. Even if LaMelo would not have been a natural fit on that roster, they still would have had a really good asset that they could always use for a trade or just find a way to integrate him with their core at that point. So that's why I think the Hornets should draft Scoot Henderson. I think most years he would be the number 1 pick. And if Victor Wembanyama was not in this class, I don't think there would be much drama between who's better out of Scoot or Brandon Miller. I think just because Victor Wembanyama is the clear number 1, that's just kind of getting people to overthink it. But I think when it all comes down to it, Charlotte's going to make the right choice. Betting on Charlotte to do something correct is a little bit bold, but I think they will get it right. With the third pick, the Portland Trailblazers select Brandon Miller out of Alabama. Will the third pick stay with the Blazers? There's a good chance it doesn't. Could this pick be traded for a star? Names that have been linked to the Blazers include Bam Adebayo, Jaylen Brown, maybe either of the Pelicans guys, Zion Williamson or Brandon Ingram. I think the Pelicans are probably the most likely team to move up if it happens. And obviously, I think if Scoot Henderson falls to 3, this pick becomes a lot more valuable, especially for a team like the Pelicans. I think for now, there's not going to be a big trade tonight with Portland. I think they're going to keep this pick for now and draft Brandon Miller, but that doesn't mean they can't trade him down the line, or it doesn't mean maybe they flip Damian Lillard and start a youth movement with Miller, Shaedon Sharpe, Anthony Simons, all the young guys they've got on this roster. So with the fourth pick, actually, we're going to talk about these two picks together because they kind of go hand in hand. So the Rockets select Amen Thompson from Overtime Elite, and the Detroit Pistons select Ausar Thompson from Overtime Elite. And you may notice my personal player ranking for them is a little bit lower than consensus. I have Amen Thompson at 7 and Ausar Thompson at 9. So why exactly am I a little bit lower on these guys than everybody else? I do see the upside with these two players, and if they hit their ceiling, they are going to be superstars in this league. The thing is, I have a lot of concern with them. I don't want to be the team who bets on a player from the Overtime Elite Academy because we haven't seen any high-level players come from there quite yet. It's not like the G League Ignite where they're playing against pros. Most of their competition is high schoolers. The Thompson twins played against high schoolers last year. In other games against high-end competition, I will say they did succeed, but even so, I feel like much of their usage and their numbers are a little bit inflated because they had teammates who are high schoolers and they played against high schoolers. There are some other Overtime Elite players who are in this draft, to be fair to them, but most of the league is comprised of 10th through 12th graders, many of whom probably will not be close to making it to the NBA. So that's kind of why I'm skeptical on them. But I will say they are the type of prospects that I do like to bet on in terms of their physical profile. They're big, long, lean players. They've got long arms. They're both phenomenal athletes, Amen in specific, but Ausar as well is a freak too. They've got defensive versatility, and they're both intriguing as playmakers. Again, Amen in specific. So I think, again, if these guys hit their ceiling, they are the type of prospects who I like, and I think they have a chance to be really good. The shooting is a concern with both of them. The mechanics are not great. The efficiency has not been great, but you very well can easily improve shooting at the next level. So I think there is reason to believe that both of these guys can become really good. I just think it's a little bit more of a long shot than other people believe. I'm very confident that Amen Thompson will be the pick to the Rockets at 4, unless possibly he goes at 3, which there are some rumors about that today. I'm not really buying it. And then the 5th pick with Detroit, I think, is a little bit more up in the air. I think this is really the first true pivot point of the draft because there's a number of different options the Pistons could look at. If not Ausar Thompson, I think the other two guys who would be very likely here are Jarace Walker from Houston and Cam Whitmore from Villanova. As a Piston fan personally, I would be rooting for Jarace Walker to be the pick. Then Cam Whitmore would be my second choice. Taylor Hendricks at that point would probably be my third choice, and then Ausar Thompson. I don't completely hate the idea of picking a Thompson here because, again, the ceiling is super high, but I just think the floor is lower and more likely than people think. Let's move on to the 6th overall pick, the Orlando Magic, with a little bit of a surprise here. I think this will be the first pick that really shocked people, but Anthony Black is the type of player who the Magic like to build around. This is a versatile player who can defend the 1 through the 3. He's a really intriguing playmaker, and I think he can fully run the point for them, while they do have some intriguing combo guards like Markelle Fultz, Jalen Suggs, even Cole Anthony. None of those guys are legitimately great playmakers at the point, and I think Anthony Black can be that. Another reason why I think Black will go earlier than expected is because the Wizards at 8 and the Jazz at 9 are reportedly both trying to trade up for him. So that suggests to me that one of these teams in this range is looking at him. I don't believe in drafting for 5th this early, but I do think it's unlikely the Rockets or Pistons would look at him. So it's got to be either the Magic or the Pacers. And I think Anthony Black probably fits the Magic more in terms of what they've been trying to build with their recent picks over the past few years. The Pacers at 7 with a pretty easy decision. They go with Jarace Walker from Houston. If he falls, I think it's a no-brainer here. I think he's the 4th best player in the draft. He's a big forward, very good defensive player. I think he's got some playmaking upside. I think he's got some shooting upside. I think he's going to be a really, really good pro. He doesn't necessarily have the ceiling that the Thompson twins do, but I do think the ceiling is higher than people give it credit for, and the floor is really high. I think the Pistons at 5 could be very much in play for Walker. If not, I would look at Indiana at 7. That'll bring us to Cam Whitmore. He has ties to the Washington, D.C. area, and he will be the selection to the Wizards at 8. There are some rumors of Whitmore's medical being a problem for teams. I kind of think that might be a smokescreen from a team who may be wanting to move up for him. The Rockets have been linked to Cam Whitmore, so maybe if they draft Amen Thompson at 4, they try to move up to the back end of the top 10 to get Cam Whitmore. I could certainly see that as a possibility. The Pistons at 5 are very much in play for Cam Whitmore. He would be a pretty good fit within that roster. Orlando, Indiana as well, both in play. The Wizards have not really had a good point guard at all since John Wall left, but I think you got to go best player available here. And with the additions of Tyus Jones and Jordan Poole, the Wizards' backcourt is probably the strength of their team for the time being. But again, if there is a guard who they think is the best player available, maybe like a Cason Wallace or something, that could be their choice. Taylor Hendricks also definitely in play. That'll bring us to the Utah Jazz here with the 9th pick, and they will go with Cason Wallace out of Kentucky. He's a really, really good prospect. I don't think he's been talked about enough, but I think he's going to be a great pro for 15 years. He's another very phenomenal defensive prospect. He's good enough offensively. If he can improve as a playmaker and as a shooter, I think he's going to have a very long career in the NBA. The Jazz have 3 first-round picks. They have 16 and 27, I think 28. So they'll have an opportunity to potentially go for a more high ceiling prospect later on. But for now, they're going to go with Cason Wallace, who's instantly going to make their basketball team better. And then with the 10th pick, the Dallas Mavericks, another team who very well could look to move out, try to add a veteran to make the roster better. Again, we're not projecting trades, so they'll go with Taylor Hendricks out of UCF. I don't think he goes any later than this. I think the ceiling with him is 5 to Detroit. I think the Pistons do really like him. Indiana is certainly in play. Washington, Utah, all those teams, very possible for Hendricks. But based on how the board plays out, he does fall here to 10. The Mavericks certainly not complaining as they'll scoop him up. With the 11th pick, the Orlando Magic select Grady Dick out of Kansas. As a big Kansas basketball fan myself, I am excited for Grady Dick, but I do think I'm a little bit lower on him than others. I try to be unbiased with my evaluations of players, and Dick comes in as my 14th ranked prospect. Grady Dick is obviously a phenomenal sharpshooter. This is somebody who can get hot from 3. And the thing with Grady Dick, though, is that the rest of his game does need some work. He's not a great defensive player. He's not great at driving to the basket quite yet. And players like that oftentimes are good regular season players, but often kind of get shut down in the playoffs because the defense works harder to not let them get open. I will say, though, I think Grady Dick has a better chance to kind of break out of that mold because he is a better athlete than people give him credit for. He's bigger, he's longer, and he's more athletic than people have kind of talked about him through this pre-draft process. He's 6'8". He is a pretty good athlete, so I think maybe he can develop those defensive intangibles. Maybe he can become a little bit more of a slasher along with his already good shooting stroke. With the 12th pick, the Oklahoma City Thunder select Derek Lively II out of Duke. Lively entered the season as the number 1 ranked high school prospect in the class of 2022, and his freshman season did not start very well at Duke. He was banged up. He had a hard time staying on the floor, but as the year went along, he did really improve. Defensively, he is a wizard, and I think he kind of fits the Oklahoma City Thunder's profile of just trying to get these big, long athletes who are versatile and can make plays. Derek Lively's got a long ways to go offensively, but I do think there is some long-term upside as a playmaker and as a scorer. But for now, he's not much more than a lob threat. But defensively is really where you're going to get the impact with him. The Thunder have gotten a lot of draft picks over the years, and I think Victor Wembanyama was one of the main apples of their eye. They're not quite going to be able to get Victor, but I think having Chet Holmgren and Derek Lively as your potential twin towers down low, who's going to score on them? Kobe Buffkin, the combo guard out of Michigan, goes to the Toronto Raptors here at 13. His stock really improved throughout the season. I think this is the range where we're going to see a lot of these combo guards start to go out the board. Look at guys like Jalen Hood-Schifino, Keontae George, Nick Smith Jr., guys like that. But I think for now, Kobe Buffkin will be the first one off the board. I think he does kind of fit the mold of a Raptors guard. He can play the 1 and the 2, and I think his versatility will be very helpful at the next level. The final lottery pick belonging to the New Orleans Pelicans will be Bilal Coulibaly. He played for Mets 92. That's the same team that Victor Wembanyama played for. Obviously, a lot of scouts have watched them this year to have their eyes on Wembanyama, but scouts have been intrigued by the long-term upside of Bilal Coulibaly. He's a very raw player. He's got a long ways to go, but his athletic tools do provide him a pretty high ceiling. Leonard Miller from the G League Ignite is one of my favorite players in this draft. I'm higher on him than just about anybody. He's my 11th ranked player in the draft. He's a kid who I'm willing to bet on. He's been with the G League Ignite program for a couple of years now. Last year, he was considering entering the draft. He was probably the youngest player in last year's draft pool, but he did really struggle throughout the pre-draft process, leading him to coming back to the G League Ignite. He really improved this year. He was better during the pre-draft profile, and I think his very linear development could signal good growth in the NBA, and I think the Atlanta Hawks are a team who might mind the idea of taking a shot on him. The Hawks have gone with some more high-floor players recently in the first round, A.J. Griffin last year being a good example. He had a very strong rookie year, so I could see them taking a swing here with Leonard Miller. He's got a ways to go as a scorer, but I do like his athletic tools. He's a good finisher inside, good rebounder, very good tools defensively. So I think he's going to be a possibly very good player at the next level and hasn't really gotten enough credit throughout the pre-draft process. Jett Howard out of Michigan goes to the Utah Jazz. They're going to add some more floor spacing with Howard, who's a very good shooter. I think Grady Dick is a name who the Jazz might keep their eye on. If he falls here, which I think is possible, they could look at him here. If not, Jett Howard is certainly a good substitute. Chris Murray out of Iowa goes to the Los Angeles Lakers. I think the Lakers are going to use all of their draft capital this year on guys who can help them win right now. The title window for LeBron James and Anthony Davis will not be around forever, so they're going to try to get guys who can impact the game at every level and make winning plays, and that's exactly what Chris Murray does, the twin brother of Keegan Murray. He may not be the athlete that Keegan Murray is, but he does have a pretty similar game in the sense that both of them are super well-rounded, lacking weaknesses. Jalen Hood-Schifino out of Indiana goes to the Miami Heat. I'm a little bit lower on him. He's my 26th ranked player, but he is an intriguing prospect here at the next level. He outperformed his high school ranking this year at Indiana. Very intriguing guard who is a pretty ball-dominant player at the time being. I think he does need to improve off the ball. If he can do that, I think he could exceed my ranking for him. Keyonte George goes to the Golden State Warriors at 19. With trading away Jordan Poole, they lost some of that microwave scoring that they had with him. Keyonte George can be a really good replacement, I think. George was a very highly regarded recruit in this year's high school class, put up a lot of points at Baylor, questionable efficiency though, particularly towards the end of the year, where he really did not play all that well. Nonetheless, this is a guy who can get you buckets, and I think the Warriors, rather than going for a big swing on upside like they have in the past, realize that their championship window also is starting to close a little bit. I think Golden State's championship window is closing a lot faster than people think, so they need to get guys who can contribute early. Maybe they go for an older college prospect rather than a freshman like Keyonte George, but I do think he'd be an intriguing fit here. I really like Dariq Whitehead here at 20 to the Rockets. So Dariq Whitehead's a pretty polarizing player. He was another very highly regarded high school recruit. I think he was a consensus top 5 player in the class. He missed some time early in the season with a foot injury. When he came back, he really wasn't the same player, although he did shoot the ball really well. He got a second surgery on the foot in the offseason, so you can kind of view it as either this foot is a real concern and his draft stock might fall, or his struggles at Duke were because he played injured, so you can just throw the Duke tape out the window, and I think it's fair to do a little bit of both. In high school, he was a dynamic player for Montverde Academy, and with him shooting the ball basically on one leg this year at Duke, there's no reason to think he can't be a really good shooter at the next level. His shot has really improved over the last couple of years, and his name has really risen over the high school ranks over the past couple of years, which I think really suggests that he's got a strong work ethic, and if he can stay healthy, I think he's got a chance to be really good and prove himself as to why he was one of the top recruits in the high school class of 2022. Sticking with the theme of highly regarded high school prospects whose freshman seasons were deteriorated by injury, Nick Smith Jr. comes in here as the 21st pick to the Brooklyn Nets. Another very intriguing scorer who the rest of his game has some work to do. He didn't live up to expectations this year at Arkansas, largely because he was banged up. But with the Nets having 2 first-round picks here, I could see them taking a shot on upside with Smith. Maxwell Lewis out of Pepperdine is the next pick here at 22. Lewis is an intriguing player to me because at the start of the year he looked really good, but then as the year went along he started to look more checked out. He didn't participate in the scrimmage at the Combine, which I think could have helped him out a little bit. So I am a little bit worried about that in the sense of his character. But nonetheless, I think he's a very intriguing player and could be a solid pick here to the Nets at 22. Early in the season, I thought he could be another Jalen Williams from the West Coast Conference as a guy whose stock rises all year, placing him in the lottery. But personally, I don't think that ends up happening, although I do predict he'll be a first-rounder. Speaking of the West Coast Conference, we have Brandon Podziemski from Santa Clara going to the Portland Trailblazers. This is a guy whose stock has really risen over the last month or so. He performed very well at the Combine, and I think he is an intriguing player at the next level. I still think the hype has gone a little bit overboard, though, but I still think here in the first round, it's not terrible value for Portland. James Nadji from FC Barcelona goes to the Kings here at 24, one of the youngest players in the draft. He's already got an NBA build as a big center. He is raw and has a lot of work to do, but I think the upside with his physical tools are quite impressive. Amari Bailey from UCLA to the Celtics. Bailey did really progress, in my opinion, throughout the year. Things started off slowly, but I do think he was better as the year went along, and I think he has placed himself back into the first round. I think Boston could be an intriguing team for him because I think Bailey potentially could contribute for a contender pretty early on. He showed that he can make winning plays down the stretch this season for UCLA, and I think Boston here at 25 could be a solid spot. The Celtics just got this pick from Memphis in the Kristaps Porzingis trade yesterday, so once we get to the draft, they're going to announce this as the Grizzlies pick, but keep in mind it's going to Boston as of now, pending another trade. The Pacers at 26 select Jordan Hawkins out of UConn, one of the best players on the title team this year. Hawkins is a bucket. The rest of his game could use some work, and I think there's a chance, as you can see here, he goes lower than expected, but I think the Pacers would be a fun spot for him. Oliver Maxence Prosper out of Marquette goes to the Hornets, another guy whose stock has skyrocketed over the last month or so. I think Max Prosper could be a really nice fit here in Charlotte. He's a very intriguing defensive player who's got good size, length, and versatility. G.G. Jackson from South Carolina to the Utah Jazz here at 28. This is the Jazz's first rounder of the day, and they're taking a swing on upside. G.G. Jackson was going to be the number one high school player, or one of the top high school players in the class of 2023. He reclassified, goes to South Carolina, and there was a lot of ups and downs. The flashes of upside were there, and there were other moments where it looked like he does not belong on an NBA floor. So he's got a ways to go, but the Jazz with 3 first-round picks can afford to take a big swing like this. Jaime Jaquez from UCLA goes to the Nuggets. Denver just got this pick the other day. The Nuggets have 3 picks in the top 40. I think at least 2 of those picks are going to be used on guys who can be good role players right away to try to keep the title window open. Very similarly to their selection of Christian Braun this past year, getting guys who will be able to contribute and get playoff minutes as rookies. Ben Shepherd out of Belmont rounds out the first round of the Wizards, another player whose stock has really risen over the last month or so. I think he has potentially played himself into first-round conversation, and he'll be the final pick of the round to the Wizards. So that'll wrap up the first round, and now on to the second round. We're going to start to move a little bit quicker. So with the 31st pick, the Detroit Pistons select Emoni Bates from Eastern Michigan. Emoni Bates is a very polarizing player for me. I have him ranked as my 58th player in the draft. I just think the ship with Emoni Bates has sailed, and I don't think I would use a pretty high draft pick on him. I get the upside with him. He showed great ability as a scorer. He had 30-plus points and a half this year with Eastern Michigan. He has the ability to create tough shots, but he doesn't really provide a whole lot else. Not a great playmaker, not a great defender, not a plus athlete. He's got short arms for his size, and now with the arrest this past October, there are some character question marks with him, along with his lack of growth as a player. 4 years ago, it was him and Victor at the top of this draft class being looked at as 2 generational players, and while Victor has lived up to the hype, Emoni Bates certainly is not. I do think, though, the Pistons would be a team who's very intrigued on taking him. Troy Weaver, the GM, has liked adding guys who at one point were very high-end prospects. Look at Marvin Bagley, James Wiseman. I think Emoni Bates does kind of fit that. He had a workout with the Pistons. He's from the Detroit area. He played at Eastern Michigan this year, so I know the Pistons have certainly done their homework on him. Ryan Rupert goes to the Denver Nuggets. I know that says it's the Pacers, but the site I used has not updated the draft order. 32 belongs to the Denver Nuggets with a trade they recently made. This is going to be the Nuggets' upside pick with Rupert, who played in the NBL. I think he could slide in the first round, but he's instead going to go into the early second. Jordan Walsh to the Spurs. I really like this pick. Jordan Walsh is a very intriguing player. Phenomenal defensively. Very good glue guy. I think the Spurs are going to like that. Bryce Sensabaugh to the Hornets, good value. Noah Clowney to Boston, again, good value. And then Julian Phillips here at 36, a little bit more of the raw player who's got very good upside. I think the Magic might like him. Colby Jones to the Nuggets. Here's insert role player number 2. Colby Jones was very good at Xavier this year. I think he's going to be a good pro. Andre Jackson, he's a player I thought about for Denver. He instead goes to the Kings. Andre Jackson was basically college basketball's version of Draymond Green this year. He doesn't score a lot of points, but he can do everything else. He does the dirty work. He's a good playmaker, good defender. I think a playoff team is going to like adding him. Tristan Vukcevic goes to the Hornets. He could be an intriguing stretch big in the future. Seth Lundy at 40 to the Los Angeles Lakers. Again, I know it says it's the Nuggets, but the Nuggets recently traded this pick to the Pacers, and the Pacers just traded it to the Lakers. I like this pick a lot for LA. Seth Lundy is a really good sharpshooter, and the Lakers are going to want to add spacing along with LeBron James. He wants shooters by him, and Seth Lundy, boy, is he a shooter. Marcus Sasser to the Hornets. He's another guy who I would like to see go to a good playoff team. I think he can contribute early on. Instead, he ends up in Charlotte. Sidy Cissoko goes to the Wizards. He played for the G League Ignite. I think he could go earlier than this, maybe sneaks into the first round, but he's a raw developmental player who the Wizards can look to develop. Jaquavion Smith to the Blazers. He's been a highly productive player at NC State over the last couple of seasons. I think he would be a nice dynamite scoring piece off the bench for them. Trace Jackson Davis to the Spurs, a veteran big man who's a smart player, another guy who I think Greg Popovich would really enjoy being able to coach. Jalen Slauson out of Furman to the Grizzlies. He's an older prospect, but had a really good season for the Furman Paladins. Furman was a very good squad this year. They obviously won a tournament game over Virginia. Mike Miles Jr. to the Atlanta Hawks here with the 46th pick. He's a very solid guard who's really been a productive player at TCU, and I think he could be good depth for them. The Indiana Pacers select Julian Strawther at 47. They just got this pick from the Lakers today. I think Strawther could go earlier than this, and he honestly should. I think he's going to be a good pro at the next level. The Pacers drafted Andrew Nembhard, another Gonzaga player in the second round last year who had a really good rookie season, and I think Julian Strawther could have a similar start to his career in Indiana. Adama Sanogo to the Los Angeles Clippers at 48. The Final Four MVP heads to the City of Stars with the Clippers. At 49, we've got the Cleveland Cavaliers who select Sir-Jabari Rice out of Texas. Another older prospect, but he's been a very solid role player with Texas. I think he could be a good fit. Jalen Wilson to the Oklahoma City Thunder out of Kansas. Jalen Wilson just kind of feels like a Thunder player to me. I don't know why. Obviously, again, as a big Kansas basketball fan, I definitely want to see Jalen Wilson do well at the next level. He's a winner. He's a tough player. He's been able to provide a bunch of different roles, whether that was as a role player on the championship team or this year as the number one scoring option. He doesn't do anything super well, though, and isn't a phenomenal athlete, which I think could dock his stock a little bit. Toumani Camara goes at 51 to the Brooklyn Nets. Intriguing young big man with Dayton who's got some upside. Isaiah Wine to the Phoenix Suns. He gets him some backcourt depth. I think the Suns are certainly going to look to add a 4-year player here or some sort of college veteran who can potentially get the minutes in year one. DeMoy Hodge, another possibility for the Suns. He ends up going with the very next pick to Minnesota. Another veteran guard who I think could be able to play off the bench as a rookie. The Kings go with Nikos Rokavopoulos out of Greece. Probably a draft and stash guy. The Kings have already drafted 2 rookies so far. So instead of using another pick on one, they're going to send this kid overseas. And then Indiana with a similar process. They select Nadir Hifi, a French guard. The Pacers have already drafted a bunch of players today. They've got a bunch of mid-round picks. So I could see them picking a foreign player or two to potentially stash them overseas and not have to use a roster spot. Jordan Miller to the Memphis Grizzlies at 56, a experienced wing who I think is another guy who could potentially come off the bench early on. 57 and 58 were both forfeited. Mohamed Gay out of Washington State goes to the Washington Wizards at 59. He's an explosive forward, impressive athlete for his size. And then Tosan Evbuonum out of Princeton to the Milwaukee Bucks with the final pick of the draft. This is a really intriguing player to wrap things up. He can do a little bit of everything, and I think he could be a solid role player for the Milwaukee Bucks at the next level. So that'll wrap up the video. Let me know what you thought of my mock draft down below. Which picks did you agree with? Which picks did you not agree with? I'm really excited to see how the draft unfolds today. It should be a lot of fun, and that'll wrap it up. So make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.